All right, and we start with breaking news moments away from Donald Trump's first rally since Kamala Harris's speech at the Democratic National Convention. Of course, Kamala Harris stole his thunder after the Republican convention. Now he wants to steal hers with the endorsement of Robert F. Kennedy. So Trump and Kennedy will be on the speech in just a minute. Trump is in Glendale, Arizona right now. That is Kari Lake, a Trump disciple, on the stump. Robert F. Kennedy will then be on the stage. We'll see what exactly Kennedy says to Trump, and maybe even more importantly, what Trump says to Kennedy, as Trump is trying to now court Kennedy's voters. Trump is still barely the odds-on favorite to win in November, despite all the joy and talk of freedom in Chicago. 4 different odds makers averaged together give him about a 55% chance of winning the presidency. Of course, you'd a lot rather be a 55% chance of winning than a 45% chance of winning. Not poll numbers. These are the betting averages. The election now is 74 days away. But when we look back, today could end up being the most consequential day of the entire 2024 race. Trump took 2 steps that could be crucial for his chances of returning to the White House. First, he won over independent presidential candidate RFK Jr. and earlier received his endorsement.
These are the principal causes that persuaded me to leave the Democratic Party and run as an independent, and now to throw my support to President Trump. The causes were free speech, the war in Ukraine, and the war on our children.
But more importantly, and perhaps something we have never seen before, Trump gave a rare mea culpa today that could change the entire race yet again. For the first time in recent memory, Trump groveled on Twitter, writing, "Thank you to Brian Kemp for all of your help and support in Georgia. I look forward to working with you, your team, and all my friends in Georgia." A few weeks ago, Trump viciously attacked Brian Kemp and his wife. Now Trump clearly needs their help. With that, we welcome you to the fairest show on television, 74 days away from the election. So we got the rally right now in Glendale, Arizona. Kamala Harris just landed back in Washington. Her speech last night, it did meet the bar, right? For supporters, she offered a bold vision for the future. For realists, she didn't meet the hype of Obama's 2008 speech. Her words, of course, will soon be forgotten. So we're now done talking about her speech because effectively her speech from last night is in the past. Elections are about the future. Harris came into the election with an almost unheard of pre-convention bounce. In the 34 days since Biden dropped, she rose by about 3.5%. That's higher than Trump rose in the polls after the assassination. Frank Luntz is one of the most highly respected pollsters on the planet and joins us now. He has been digging into this numbers. Boy, Frank, there's so much to do here. I think we start with what's on the screen right now, which is the RFK endorsement of Donald Trump. At one point, the RFK vote was, 10, 15 points? Now it's down to 4. Yeah. Is this going to really make a difference?
It will, and it won't. It's probably worth about 1% for Trump, and that 1% could be everything if it's in all the swing states. In the end, the reason why Kennedy was drawing 10, 12, even as high as 14% is because he was taking votes away from Joe Biden. Joe Biden's gone. Kamala Harris has replaced him, and his vote collapsed down to about 4 or 5%. And what's left is a Trump vote. Some of them are simply not going to participate in November. Roughly 2 to 1, the ones who are remaining will vote for Trump over Harris. And that's worth a single percent, and a single percent can make the difference in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
All right, and they're in Arizona today. Look, Robert F. Kennedy went scorched earth on the Democratic Party today, right? They're bought and paid for, the corporate media. He was censored, on and on and on. If RFK had endorsed Harris rather than Trump, would the coverage and the conversation be a lot different about it?
That's a really good question. Good for you. That's a really good question. I think it would have been. I think, quite frankly, that most of the people who report the news, even though they're supposed to be objective, and even though they try to be objective, that there is a bias. And it's a bias that they hold inside And sometimes it's reflected in what we see, what we hear, and probably most importantly, what we read. And the key here is whether or not you can have faith, trust, and confidence in what you're being told. If he had endorsed Harris, I do think he would have been regarded as a hero. But because he endorsed Trump, the people who are communicating that are not giving him the credit that he deserves. And I think that we have to be careful in the last 73 days of this election campaign to understand the motivations of the people providing us information like what I'm doing right now, because I am dedicated to getting this election correct.
Look, and you call balls and strikes, which is what we try to do here. There's a lot to unpack in what you just said. But to be fair, right, Donald Trump has been known to say, shall we say, some unusual things that require explanation and that the people who report the news capture on, sometimes fairly, sometimes unfairly. The one person who says sometimes even wackier stuff than Donald Trump is Robert F. Kennedy. We don't know what he's going to say tonight, but we also know that if he goes out on the trail for Donald Trump, then Donald Trump has to answer for everything that Robert F. Kennedy says. Is that a good thing for Donald Trump?
Whatever Trump says, he's going to be held accountable for it. And I actually believe I'm one of the people who thinks he should be saying less, not more. That if the campaign is based on issues, particularly inflation and immigration, Donald Trump has the advantage. If the campaign is about the character traits and attributes of the candidates, then Kamala Harris has the advantage.
All right, so we think about the persuadable voters that are left out there, because you rightly point out there's not many of them. You think about who right now Donald Trump has in his camp. Tulsi Gabbard, Nikki Haley's endorsed him, and now Robert F. Kennedy. What is that group? What do those people represent that Trump has an opportunity to use?
So let me be candid that these endorsements don't matter as much as they used to. That because we have the ability to watch networks like yours, because we have the ability to collect information on social media, that we have an infinite capability to get the news from an infinite number of sources, any one source, any one endorsement just doesn't matter as much as it did 20 or 30 years ago. Now, that said, if Trump communicates the width and breadth of ideological support for him, and if they focus on policy, that's going to be very good. I do need to emphasize, and to shooting this straight, that if it is about attributes, if he continues to attack Harris in the way that he has done, and he gets away from inflation, which is really affordability, stops talking about paycheck to paycheck voters, which is better than working class or middle class. The language does matter here. If he does that, he's in the driver's seat. If he doesn't do that, she will win.
I'm fascinated by what you just said when you talked about the language mattering. And it's the first person I've heard who said it, which is why we like having you on, because you say things that are interesting and different than everybody else. You define this as paycheck to paycheck voters. That's almost 2/3 of America right now. 50% of America says they're broke, as however they want to define it. Donald Trump earlier today in Nevada talking about no taxes on tips. Take a listen.
But the United States is home to an estimated 5.5 million workers whose livelihoods depend on tip income. But in fact, Kamala cast the tie-breaking vote to hire 87,000 new IRS agents to go after your tip income.
All right, so that's Donald Trump today. Here's Kamala Harris last night speaking to, and she used the words that you said not to, middle class. Take a listen.
We are charting a new way forward to a future with a strong and growing middle class. Compare that to Donald Trump, because I think everyone here knows he doesn't actually fight for the middle class.
Who wins that argument?
Trump does. Trump does, because it's paycheck to paycheck. It's hardworking taxpayers, even more than the middle class, because that's who we respect. It's hardworking tax-paying families. He wins the argument on that issue. He wins the argument on affordability, which is food and fuel, housing and health care. He wins the argument on immigration, which is broader than that. For the immigration, it's also about safety. It's about security. The Democrats, win the argument on health care, and they win the argument on abortion. And the one where the fight's going to be, I believe, Social Security and Medicare. Trump saying that Social Security and Medicare should not be taxed was a brilliant political move, but he's not talking about it. He's not emphasizing it. And these are the things that still keep him in the game. Now, make no mistake, if the election were held right now, she would win narrowly because of her lead in those 3 key swing states in the Midwest. That said, the issues favored Donald Trump. The direction of the country, so negative, one of the most negative that it's been in 50 years. The direction of the country favors Donald Trump. The attributes and character traits of the candidates favor Kamala Harris. You tell me what the election is waged on, and I tell you who wins and who loses.
Right. Who defines this election, right? Who defines the field of battle? Who defines each candidate? And that's the election. It's really interesting, right? Because Joe Biden dropping out really blunted Donald Trump's post-convention bounce. He had this great convention. The Republican Party was unified. And then all of a sudden, this train hit, which was Joe Biden dropping out, and changed absolutely everything. Obviously, the timing tonight for RFK's endorsement is trying to do the same thing to Kamala Harris. She headed back to Washington. Post-convention bounces. Bill Clinton plus 16. Bill Clinton plus 5 after 96, won in the landslide. Al Gore plus 8 after his convention, although he went on to lose. John Kerry went on to lose, had a convention unbounce, I guess you could call it. Obama, no surprise, after 2008. Hillary Clinton got a bounce. Joe Biden did not. Did Harris's post-convention bounce really happen pre-convention?
Exactly. And that's exactly the point. And let's be specific. It happened among younger women, 18 to 34, who were disengaged from the election. They did not want to vote for someone who was 77 years old or someone who was 80. And so they were disengaged, disinvolved. The advent of Harris on the top of the ticket brought them into politics, brought them into the election, and that's where so much of her newfound vote comes from. And the second is, as I started this interview, from Robert F. Kennedy's supporters. The ones that moved from him to her made a significant, meaningful, measurable difference. Now, it is unlikely that she's going to gain any more than 2 or 3 points because it's been already baked into the system. That said, she still has a lead. I want to be clear about this. She would win if the election were held today. The most important date, the thing where everything matters, where you see Trump and Harris side by side, is the presidential debate on September 10th. That night will determine the election, not these conventions. It's that debate on September 10th.
Well, and that debate in June is what changed everything. I think we can all agree. So we may have now a September surprise on top of all that. All right. It's great to see you, my friend. Thank you. Great being with you during the convention. Your insights always much appreciated. We appreciate it.
It's a privilege. Thank you very much.
Yeah, pleasure's ours. Trump's temperament, as Frank just alluded to, will make or break this election. He just did something. Donald Trump did something that he's never done before. Will it be enough to win the state of Georgia? That could prove crucial. And the former president is an open book at this point, but there are some things we do not know about Walz and Harris, especially Walz. The surprises coming before Election Day that will change everything. Live pictures of Glendale, Arizona. Donald Trump takes the stage any moment. Something kind of odd is happening with the former president. He is learning from the mistakes that kept him out of the White House in 2020. As we mentioned, he all but apologized, something that we have never reported on before because it hasn't happened, and ended his beef with Brian Kemp, the very popular governor of the state of Georgia. For his part, Kemp appeared on Fox News to rain on the Democrats' DNC parade and throw his support behind Donald Trump.
People are going to really start thinking it's not so joyful when I look at my bank account. It's not joyful when I can't make my car payment or my rent payment, or I have to decide whether I'm going to buy gas or buy groceries. So we need to send Donald Trump back to the White House.
Trump desperately needs Georgia's 16 electoral college votes. He also needs the electoral college votes in Arizona as well. Speaking of Georgia, making peace with the state's wildly popular Republican governor is a very good place to start, especially if he's going to weather attacks like this from Kamala Harris.
Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious.
Rod Blagojevich is with us now, former governor of the state of Illinois. Good to see you. You were one of the very few non-journalists who was both at the DNC here in Chicago and at the RNC in Milwaukee. You don't get to do what you did and become governor of Illinois without understanding politics. Give us your fair assessment of the energy at both.
Well, I felt a real powerful energy at the Republican convention. It reminded me a lot of 2008 Denver when Obama was nominated and went on to win big in November. There was a lot of euphoria and exuberance. The Democrat convention had a different feeling. There was a little more anger in the room, but there was hopefulness because things had dramatically changed with Kamala Harris being the candidate now and President Biden stepping aside. So they were very different in many ways and yet similar. But I would say that one of the reasons I had the success in politics that you just mentioned was because I had people like Frank Luntz working for me. And I just listened to his assessment of the election. It was very astute because this election really is going to come down to who defines the primary issues that matter to voters. And it truly is what Bill Clinton said back in 1992, the economy is stupid. And whether character is an issue or not, and I would argue that President Trump actually has a pretty darn good character. I know him a little bit. But if you want to say that that's a negative for him.
Do you think this tweet in makeup with Brian Kemp, he was very angry with Brian Kemp over the 2020 election because Kemp said that Trump lost Georgia. And he went after Trump went after Brian Kemp, went after Brian Kemp's wife. I've never heard Donald Trump even think about apologizing or making a mea culpa. And he did it last night. This is significant.
Well, he's a practical man, and it's a practical business, politics, and it's a smart move, and it's the right thing to do. The Republicans need to be unified. It is a frightening prospect if you believe in capitalism and freedom, that a candidate who was left of Bernie Sanders is now the Democratic standard bearer. The Democratic Party has been hijacked by the socialists. And
you really believe that?
I very much believe that.
Even though we hear from centrist Democrats all the time that that's not the case.
Well, they might say that on TV, but sometimes they'll privately say different things.
Okay. You mean politicians say things in private they don't say on TV? Stunning to me. But I'm glad you brought this up about the Democratic Party because you were with them, you know them well. What did you see last night and while you were at the convention? You've got the Democratic Party and then you've got RFK Jr. out there. At one point, he was getting 15%. Most of that vote has gone back to Harris. What needs to happen over the next 74 days, but particularly tonight, for those RFK voters who went to Harris for Trump to get them back?
Well, I think that Robert Kennedy Jr.'s support now is largely a Trump supporter. I think they're angry. It's a populist vote. And Trump is realigning American politics. He's changing politics. The traditional Republicans are gone. Trump has changed the Republican Party. It's a party now that's fighting more for working people than the Democratic Party is. The Democratic Party used to be that, but not anymore. This is a party, the new Republican Party, that would embrace somebody like Robert Kennedy Jr. and the sort of values and the sort of priorities that Robert Kennedy's father stood for. And so those Democrats who've left were Democrats disgruntled because of Biden. But what's left is largely a Trump vote. And I think if they stick to the issues, as Frank Luntz says, they are completely on President Trump's side. Groceries cost 20% more now than they did when Trump was president. A dozen eggs is 126% more than it was when Trump was president. Carton of orange juice, 71%. The price of gasoline is high.
You still remember how to do it.
Well, but in the final analysis, the voters, whether they like Trump or not, will have to decide what's in the best interest of their families. Sure, and the kitchen table issues are going to be the ones that make the difference.
Right. They make the difference. Obviously, Kamala Harris wants this to be a referendum on, and we put up Trump's low-key good week. He's got a very good, actually, interestingly, has had a hugely good week. Kamala Harris keeps trying to make this about Donald Trump's character and his stance on abortion. Here's her last night about the Trump indictments.
He was found guilty of fraud by a jury of everyday Americans and separately found liable for committing sexual abuse. And consider what he intends to do if we give him power again.
She was very careful not to talk about the indictments as it related to January 6th and in the indictments as it related to the Biden and Harris DOJ. You think that was intentional? You think it was enough separation between pointing out bad things she thinks Donald Trump's done and the fact that she's running against him and it's her DOJ responsible for indicting him?
Well, this is the Marxist approach that Democrats have taken to American politics. The rule of law and the Constitution means nothing to them. They'll use it and abuse it for political purposes. That alone is a reason to vote against her and that new Democrat Party. Because these
Are you worried if they get back in power, they're going to go back after you?
Not impossible in view of what's happened to me. But weaponized prosecutions is the new politics today, and this is frightening. This is supposed to be a free country. Bobby Kennedy Jr. is running partly because he's against that sort of thing, and he's right to feel that way. And the bottom line is those convictions she's talking about were by Democratic prosecutors before Democratic judges in venues with Democratic juries, and they were for non-crimes with jury instructions that moved lines and criminalized things that were legal. I know this better than anybody because I spent 8 years sheltering in place for political things that weren't crimes.
Sheltering in place. There's a book coming out about your time in prison and then the pardon that got you out. It's good to see you, sir.
Thanks, Leland. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Governor. Appreciate it. 74 days till November 5th, and nobody is talking about all the things that will change the presidential race between now and then. Coming up, the game changers yet to come. Live pictures, Glendale, Arizona, outside of Phoenix. Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA is blasting ahead of Donald Trump taking the stage. First rally since Kamala Harris was the Democratic nominee and accepted the nomination last night since the DNC. Robert F. Kennedy will soon be on the stage with Donald Trump to endorse him. Little bit of audio problems from the rally in Glendale, but we'll see if we can listen to the former president for his first rally since the DNC. Here we go.
Well, thank you very much, and a very big hello, Arizona. Hello, Phoenix. I'm thrilled to be back in this incredible state with thousands of proud, hardworking American patriots. That's what you are. You built our country. 74 days from now, can you imagine? 74 days. Then we gently move into that beautiful White House and we take over our country and we make it great again. We're going to win Arizona. We're going to defeat Comrade Kamala Harris. And we're going to win back our beautiful White House. We're going to win it back. We're going to win it back in record force. Everyone here tonight is part of the greatest political movement in the history of our country. You know, this is the greatest political movement. It's called Make America Great Again. And it's right now bigger and better and stronger than it ever was before. You know, we won in 2016, and we did much better in 2020. A lot of people don't understand.
All right, Donald Trump starting off strong. For the first time I've heard on a pretty tight script at a rally referring to Comrade Kamala Harris rather than starting off talking about Donald Trump. We're going to keep listening to President Trump. Talking about Comrade Kamala Harris rather than Joe Biden for the first time. Keep listening to Donald Trump. Wait for the Robert F. Kennedy endorsement that will be on the stage, we're told, in about 10 or 15 minutes. So we will wait for that. We bring in our panel, Lauren Wright, Associate Research Scholar, Lecturer in Politics, Public Affairs, Princeton University, former advisor to Bill and Hillary Clinton, Democratic strategist Richard Goodstein. Richard, first to you. Hillary Clinton got a huge bump out of the conventions, and I don't have to tell you all the things that changed between the convention and her 2016 loss. She called Trump supporters the basket of deplorables. She overheated at the 9/11 memorial service, revealed that she had pneumonia. The WikiLeaks release of Clinton campaign emails, the Access Hollywood tape of Trump's comments, and James Comey holding his famous news conference about her emails. I know Democrats are feeling great. I was at the convention last night. What worries you the most about the unknown unknowns?
I do want to correct the record in a couple of respects from earlier in the show. Frank Lund said RFK gives Trump 1 point. 538 did a poll. It was 0.2.
Richard, can we move forward, please, rather than in the past?
Wait, you owe it to your viewers. It's not tied. She's up 3.7. She was up 1.2 at the beginning of the week. There is a bounce that's happening. So all that stuff, I think your viewers deserve to know that. My answer to your question is, obviously, both of them have challenges. I think for Trump and Harris, the challenge will be the debate. And I think from a policy standpoint, the policies, frankly, work in Harris's favor, including the economy, which the Wall Street Journal, as you know, called the U.S. economy the envy of the world, a quote. Right? So I actually think that
by the way, just because I can't, it's really hard when you have somebody come on and try to fact check a guest, especially a pollster who's talking about polls, and he can't defend himself. I'll just put this up here. The 2024 Electoral College no toss-up states from Real Clear Politics still has Trump ahead. So that's their average if we want to talk about the Real Clear Politics Electoral College things. But I'm going to move on to Lauren for a real quick second here. Lauren, I'll ask you the same question. What should Donald Trump, who, despite 34 great days for Kamala Harris, is either tied or, in this case, ahead or maybe a couple points behind in the national race, but still is doing very well, what is his biggest risk?
Himself, and that's always his biggest risk. Just in this couple seconds you showed of the speech, he gave the Comrade Kamala line, which I think actually will be very effective, and then he denied the 2020 election results. And that's just Trump. That's what you get, the mixed bag of these things that are very popular and these things that are not. And if he stays away from the personal attacks on Harris and sticks to the policies, because actually Republicans are favored on the economy, inflation, immigration, crime, all the top issues for voters, he will win. If he attacks her personally, he will lose. And it's also just really antithetical to conservatism to make the race about personal identity. Conservatives de-emphasize a person's race and gender. Trump has made it the subject of the campaign in a way that I don't think helps.
Well, sufficing to say Donald Trump is many things. People could argue he is anything but, at least in the traditional sense of the term, a conservative. When you said that, Richard, what do you make of this? We always talk about October surprises, but in this case, we've had the debate, the first debate in June. You had the Trump assassination. You had Joe Biden dropping out. You had 3 major events. And if we go back to the middle of June, the race was essentially tied. And now, depending on how you want to look at it, okay, I'll give you that you can have polls that say everything, but it's by and large somewhere between tied and a little bit, barely, in Harris's favor.
Look, again, we have not seen the full effect of the bounce. We saw it over the course of the week. Let's talk a week from now. She's up 3.7 today on 538. I bet you it's more later. Look, the fact of the matter is we obviously don't know. The notion that RFK, though, is a game changer is a myth, unless Trump is doubling down on weirdness and dangerousness, because he and Bobby Kennedy Jr. have a lot in common when it comes to being conspiratorial, right? Having abused women.
I want to be respectful, though. To the Bobby Kennedy voters, of whom at one point there were 15% of the American electorate. I've never figured that getting votes came from insulting people. Isn't calling voters weird if people support Bobby Kennedy or Donald Trump weird? Isn't that a little bit like calling them deplorables?
No. So I'm calling Bobby Kennedy weird because, for example, if he and Donald Trump, 2 anti-vaxxers, are calling the shots, suburban women, so a big swing vote, would be freaked out at what this is going to do for their kids. Are we going to have polio come back? We have measles coming back? These people don't want our children vaccinated. That is scary to suburban women. He's weird. The people who support him are dwindling, and I think at the end of the day will be very, very few.
Well, you've got a point. They're dwindling. It was down to a couple of percentage points at the end. Lauren, I'll give you the last 30 seconds. Is there anything that Bobby Kennedy says today with Donald Trump? We'll take the remarks when they happen, assuming the signal lives here, that appeals to the Bobby Kennedy voters who then went to Harris after Biden dropped out?
Yes, he can say, I used to be a Democrat. I agree with a lot of the policies, but, Trump's campaign brought me in and agreed to talk to me. And the entire message of the DNC last night was supposed to be, no matter what your views are, we want you. If you're a Republican, we want you. Independent, we want you. We're a big tent, and we want to win this election. And all I've heard all day from Democrats is these people are fringe and they're weird, and I don't think that's going to be effective. Elections are about addition, not subtraction, and I don't think any campaign in its right mind should try to alienate anybody.
Yeah, whoever figures the addition part out normally ends up winning. All right, Richard, thank you. Lauren, thank you. Looking forward to having you both back on set when we're in D.C. We'll see you guys soon. Want to let you know that the signal from the Trump rally with RFK is taking a hit just because there's so many cell phones, and that's how the signal's getting out in the arena. That said, everybody, all the networks take the same signal. So don't change channels. We're going to be listening as we can to what Donald Trump says when RFK comes out. We'll bring it to you. Governor Tim Walz channeled the late Richard Simmons this week. Yeah, he did. There's the walkout. What Coach Walz is really saying with this walkout performance.
Father and uncle in service to our country, and Bobby himself was subject to repeated
Donald Trump
threats
on the stage in Arizona with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to personally accept his endorsement. Bobby Kennedy Jr. expected to speak in just a minute, so we'll listen in.
And this is a tribute in honor of Bobby. I am announcing tonight that upon my election, I will establish a new independent Presidential Commission on Assassination Attempts. And they will be tasked with releasing all of the remaining documents pertaining to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. And they will also conduct a rigorous review of the attack last month. But I tell you, I have never had more people ask me, please, sir, release the documents on the Kennedy assassination. And we're going to do that. And I also want to salute Bobby's decades of work as an advocate for the health of our families and our children. Nobody's done more. Millions and millions of Americans who want clean air, clean water, and a healthy nation have concerns about toxins in our environment and pesticides in our food. That's why today I'm repeating my pledge to establish a panel of top experts working with Bobby to investigate what is causing the decades-long increase in chronic health problems and childhood diseases, including autoimmune disorders, autism, obesity, infertility, and many more. We want every child in America to grow up and to live a long and healthy life. So I just want to ask Bobby to speak for a little while. I'll stand aside. I'm going to stand aside. But I can only tell you, I've known him a long time. We've been a little bit on the opposite side of the equation, but I will say this, he is a brilliant, I still think of him as young. He's not that young. I always call him young, but he's not that young. But he is a phenomenal person, a phenomenal man who loves the people of this country as much as anybody can love the people of this country. So, Bobby, please say a few words. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, President Trump. Thank you. Now, a few hours after the assassination attempt at Butler, I got a call from a safe food advocate named Kelly Means, who's been fighting for many years to try to end the corruption at CDC and FDA and USDA. And these institutions, these regulatory agencies, are actually run by the big food processing companies, the big ag and the chemical companies that they're supposed to regulate. And he said to me that he'd been advising me for many years and on my campaign. And he told me that night that he was also advising President Trump. And he asked if I would talk to President Trump. And I said, of course. And about a few minutes later, I got a call from the president. And we talked. We had a very good talk. And then he invited me to come see him the next day. And I went to Minneapolis and saw him. We met again a couple of weeks later in Florida. And we talked about, not about the things that separate us because we don't agree on everything, but on the values and the issues.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on the stage with Donald Trump for the big endorsement. Donald Trump saying, among other things, that there would be an independent presidential commission on assassinations, and he would release all the documents as it relates to the assassination of JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy's uncle, when he is elected president. We're working on getting a better signal up. There are so many cell phones inside that arena. The signals are taking some hits, so as we call it in the business. So we're going to get Colby Hall here with us. Colby, over the past few days since it became apparent that Bobby Kennedy Jr. was going to drop out and endorse Donald Trump, somewhere between ridicule and scorn might be the best way to describe the response of most reporters, certainly Democrats, and a lot of the media and political class in America. Am I right to say that if Bobby Kennedy Jr. was endorsing Kamala Harris today rather than Donald Trump, the response would be very different?
No, you're not wrong. And I think, it would be different largely because Bobby Kennedy or RFK Jr. has forever held positions that are in line with Democratic policies. And so, what you're seeing here, I think, is two individuals. Politicians play in the attention economy. No one's better at that than Donald Trump. And what better way to pivot the story following the DNC that was triumphant and celebratory and joyful for Kamala Harris than to have this moment that we're talking about that sort of ostensibly brings 2%, 5%, whatever percentage of RFK supporters in line with Trump. So I think it's a symbiotic relationship. They mutually benefit. But the criticism about RFK here is not out of the blue. Like he's long held positions that are very different from Trump, which we can see in what he was just saying about big business, controlling big pharma. Those big businesses are a lot of the friends of Trump's that he's aimed to sort of help.
Well, and there was a lot of big pharma at the DNC spending an awful lot of money, as Chris Cuomo pointed out, on all the skyboxes and the like. When it comes to this, somewhere between 1 and 10% of the electorate, at one point Kennedy was at 15%. But to be fair, that was when Joe Biden was really infirmed and having a difficult time. And you can see that was almost a protest vote to let the Democratic Party know that there was real anger. Whatever that percentage is, elections are about addition. You don't get anywhere insulting people and ridiculing people. What is going on that the same folks who said Trump supporters cling to their guns and religion and that Trump supporters are deplorables are not learning that speaking about voters who have real concerns, who have real issues, and who have real feelings that may not be in the mainstream doesn't help.
It's a great point. And one of the things that hasn't really been spoken about in Kamala Harris's speech, she didn't talk about MAGA or ultra MAGA at all, which was a huge departure from Biden's rhetoric. I mean, she talked about Trump at all, but she wasn't divisive. And so who is the RFK supporter now after some of the stories that have evolved? It's not clear. So I can't tell you what this will mean, but it will be interesting to follow.
That's why we have elections, 74 days until it. Colby Hall of Mediaite. Colby, thank you very much. We're going to keep working on getting a better signal from Arizona and be right back.